It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels perfectly ordinary until the moment it isn't. The sun was a soft, pleasant warmth on my skin as I drove home from the office, the late autumn air carrying a faint crispness that promised a cool evening. The traffic was light, a rare treat on the main thoroughfare that cut through the city's sprawling suburbs. I had my favorite podcast playing, a low murmur of conversation that filled the quiet of my car. I was thinking about what to make for dinner, my mind completely disconnected from any sense of urgency or alarm. This was my daily routine, a calm, predictable part of my week, a moment of transition from the demands of work to the simple comfort of home. My car, a modest but reliable sedan, hummed along smoothly, a trusted companion on countless journeys. The road ahead was clear, a straight shot towards a familiar intersection, the traffic lights ahead glowing a reassuring green. There was only one car ahead of me, a pristine white luxury SUV with an out-of-state license plate, its taillights a clean, bright red. I kept a safe and standard distance, allowing for plenty of space, my foot hovering lightly over the brake pedal out of habit more than necessity. The world was calm, mundane, and entirely without incident. And then, in a fraction of a second, the world changed. The white SUV's brake lights flared with an abrupt, violent intensity. It wasn't a gentle slow down, it was an instant, full stop from a cruising speed. There was no warning, no signal, no swerve, no sudden obstacle in the road. It was as if the driver had slammed their foot on the brake pedal with malicious intent. My reflexes, honed by years of defensive driving, were good, but not superhuman. I instinctively stomped on my own brakes, the tires groaning in protest against the asphalt, but it wasn't enough. The small gap between our cars disappeared with a gentle crunch of plastic and a muffled thud. The impact was minimal, a low-speed tap, the kind that might just scuff the paint and dislodge a license plate. My car jerked forward slightly, and I felt a jolt in my seat, but that was it. I was fine. I wasn't even shocked, just slightly annoyed at the inconvenience. I assumed the driver of the SUV had made a mistake and we would exchange information, probably share a laugh about the minor incident, and go on with our lives. But as I watched the driver's door swing open, I knew instantly that this wouldn't be a simple exchange of pleasantries. The woman who emerged from the SUV was the very embodiment of the word Karen. Her face, framed by a perfectly coiffed blonde bob, was already contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Her hands were planted on her hips, her eyes narrowed into menacing slits. Before I could even get out of my car, she began screaming, her voice shrill and piercing enough to cut through the quiet afternoon air. "What is wrong with you? Are you blind? You just hit my brand new car, you reckless moron." She was already a human tsunami of entitlement, standing in the middle of the road as if she owned it, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at my car. I finally got out, my hands up in a gesture of calm, but she wasn't listening. She was a runaway train of fury, a one-woman show of victimhood. "I think I have whiplash. You're going to pay for this. My back is killing me. Do you have any idea how much this car costs?" She gestured theatrically at her perfectly fine rear bumper, which had a tiny, barely there scuff mark. The performance was so over the top, so disproportionate to the minor impact, that a flicker of suspicion sparked in my mind. She was screaming about whiplash, but her movements were quick and agile, her posture was perfect, and her face was flushed with anger, not pain. She immediately started yelling into her phone, her voice shifting from a panicked wail to a tearful sob as she spoke to what was presumably an emergency dispatcher or a friend. The shift in her tone was jarring and obviously fake. She pointed at me and then at my car, giving a wildly inaccurate account of the event, claiming I was speeding and had run a red light. She wasn't just angry, she was performing, building a false narrative in real time. I tried to interrupt, to state the simple truth that the light was green and she had braked suddenly, but she just waved a hand at me dismissively, as if I were a piece of lint she was brushing off her designer coat. Overwhelmed and utterly baffled by her aggressive and theatrical behavior, I felt a familiar sense of dread creeping in. I was an honest person trapped in a dishonest situation, and I had no way to prove my side of the story. I felt helpless, exposed, and entirely at her mercy. All I could do was stand there, silently fuming, as she continued to make a show of her supposed pain and suffering. This wasn't an accident. This was a trap. I reached for my phone to call my insurance company, my mind racing 100 miles a minute, trying to figure out how to defend myself against such a brazen lie. My hand reached towards my glove compartment for my insurance and registration paperwork, and as I looked up from my phone, my eyes landed on a small, rectangular device mounted unobtrusively just below my rearview mirror. It was my Dashcam. A little red light was blinking, a silent beacon in the midst of the chaos. The camera had been on and recording since I started the car, capturing every moment, the green light, her abrupt and unexplained stop, the minor impact, her immediate and theatrical performance, her every move, her every word. In that instant, the sickening feeling of helplessness was washed away by a powerful, quiet calm. The chaos around me seemed to slow down. I wasn't just a victim in a car accident. I was an observer with evidence. The silent witness on my dashboard had just turned this woman's elaborate lie into a one-way ticket to her own downfall. I looked at her, still yelling and gesturing wildly, completely unaware that her entire performance had just been caught on camera, and a slow, triumphant smile spread across my face. The slow, triumphant smile that had spread across my face vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the grim resolve needed to navigate the unfolding farce. Karen, still oblivious to the silent, watchful eye of my dashcam, continued her theatrical performance for the benefit of anyone within earshot, though thankfully, no one else seemed to be stopping. After exchanging information, which she provided with an air of long-suffering martyrdom, and a brief, perfunctory chat with a police officer who seemed more interested in clearing the road than dissecting the nuances of a minor fender bender, we parted ways. The officer, having jotted down both our accounts, gave a noncommittal shrug and advised us to let the insurance companies sort it out. His impartiality, while technically correct, felt like a small victory for Karen, whose tearful dramatics seemed to have swayed him just enough to record her version of events as genuinely as mine. As I drove away, the immediate adrenaline subsided, replaced by a cold, simmering anger. I knew what she was doing. I had seen enough internet videos to recognize the playbook. This wasn't just an accident, it was an attempted scam, and I was her latest target. The real battle began the moment I called my insurance company. The calm, reassuring voice of the claims agent was a stark contrast to the previous hour of chaos, but their words soon plunged me into a bureaucratic labyrinth. I meticulously recounted the events, emphasizing Karen's sudden, unprovoked stop, and her immediate, aggressive reaction. The agent listened patiently, typing away, then informed me that Karen had already filed a claim, portraying herself as the aggrieved party who had been violently rear-ended by a distracted driver. She's claiming significant whiplash and lower back pain. Sir, the agent stated, her voice flat, devoid of judgment, but heavy with the weight of standard procedure. And substantial damage to the rear of her vehicle. My blood ran cold. Significant. Whiplash. Substantial damage. The impact had barely moved my car. My own bumper, when I later inspected it, had a small, almost invisible crack in the plastic casing, while her luxury SUV had little more than a smudge of dirt and that faint scuff mark. The audacity of her lies was breathtaking, yet also, in a perverse way, impressive. It was a well-rehearsed performance, and I was acutely aware that without the dashcam, it would have been my word against hers, and given her theatrical flair. I knew whose side the system would likely lean towards. Over the next few days, the full extent of Karen's exaggerated claims began to unfold like a grotesque flower. Calls from her, insurance company started coming in, followed by a letter from her attorney, a slick-looking firm specializing in personal injury claims. The letter was a boilerplate collection of legal jargon, but the gist was clear. They were seeking compensation for Karen's medical bills, lost wages due to her debilitating injuries, pain and suffering, and the astronomical cost of repairing her severely damaged vehicle. The estimated repair bill for her SUV was laughably high, nearly triple what I knew a minor bumper repair should cost. It included items like frame inspection and suspension alignment, implying an impact that simply hadn't occurred. My client is in excruciating pain and unable to perform daily tasks, the letter read, a direct quote from Karen's claim. Yet, just hours after the accident, I had watched her stride purposefully, almost aggressively, around her vehicle, pointing and yelling without a hint of discomfort. The sheer disconnect between her claims and reality fueled my suspicion, turning it into a burning conviction. This wasn't just about an accident anymore. It was about exposing a calculated deception. The inconsistencies continued to pile up, each one a flashing red light signaling Karen's deceit. My own insurance adjuster, a seasoned professional named Frank, expressed quiet skepticism after reviewing the initial police report and my less than detailed account. She's got quite the story. Son, he'd said on the phone, a dry chuckle in his voice, says you were practically doing 90 and ran her off the road. I patiently reiterated my version, but I could sense his weariness, the way he'd heard similar, conflicting stories 1,000 times before. He mentioned that Karen had provided a witness statement from a bystander who corroborated her claims, someone who apparently saw the whole thing. This was a detail she hadn't mentioned at the scene, and it raised an immediate red flag. The road had been relatively empty. Who was this phantom witness? And why hadn't they approached me? Another call came in, this time from a physiotherapy clinic, scheduling Karen for intensive daily sessions for her severe neck and back trauma. The speed with which she had secured legal representation and medical appointments suggested a well-oiled machine, not a genuinely injured party reacting to a sudden event. It was too smooth, too coordinated. My suspicion deepened into certainty. I wasn't dealing with a genuinely injured individual. I was up against a professional, or at least a highly practiced, scam artist. Every piece of communication from Karen's side felt manufactured, every claim inflated, every detail carefully curated to paint me as the negligent culprit and her as the helpless victim. The more I heard, the more my mind replayed the incident, her instantaneous rage, her immediate pivot to physical injury claims, the absurdly expensive car, the quick jump to legal action. It all clicked into place. This was her hustle. She probably staged these accidents regularly, targeting unassuming drivers who might buckle under the pressure of legal threats and insurance bureaucracy. The thought made my stomach churn with a mixture of disgust and defiance. She thought she had me trapped, cornered into paying for her elaborate scheme. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that my unassuming little sedan held the undeniable truth, silently recording her entire charade from the very first moment. The Dashcam, that small, unassuming device, was my secret weapon, and with every outrageous claim she made, its power grew, transforming from a simple recording into a powerful, irrefutable piece of evidence that would soon expose her for exactly who she was. The frustration was real, the process was annoying, but beneath it all, a quiet confidence began to build. She was digging her own grave with every lie, and I had the shovel to bury her in it. The quiet confidence from my Dashcam's revelation, solidified by the unsettling pattern of Karen's previous scams, had transmuted into a cold, calculated determination. The constant stream of legal letters and phone calls from her attorney, each one demanding more compensation for her phantom injuries and inflated damages, only fueled my resolve. They wanted a quick settlement, banking on my frustration and fear, but they had fundamentally misjudged me. I wasn't just going to pay and be done with it, I was going to expose her. The Dashcam footage was a loaded gun, and I needed to choose the perfect moment to pull the trigger. My first call was to my own insurance company, specifically to Frank, my adjuster. I didn't immediately reveal the dashcam footage. Instead, I spoke broadly about my deepening concerns regarding the legitimacy of Karen's claims. I shared the vague outline of my online research, the strikingly similar accidents and injury reports attributed to a Karen Peterson in the region. Frank, to his credit, was intrigued. "You're saying this isn't her first rodeo?" Then, he'd asked, his voice losing its usual detached professionalism. I confirmed my suspicions without divulging the absolute proof. He suggested a mediation session, a common step in these disputes, where both parties and their legal representatives would meet with a neutral third-party mediator to try and reach a settlement. This was precisely the stage I wanted, a formal setting, a neutral observer, and Karen herself present. Over the next few days, my planning became meticulous. I transferred the dashcam footage to a secure drive and made multiple copies. I consulted a trusted friend who was an attorney, not to hire them, but to understand the nuances of a mediation hearing and how best to present irrefutable evidence. He advised me to hold back the footage until Karen and her team had fully committed to their narrative, detailing all their exaggerated claims. "Let them build their castle of lies," he'd said, "and then you bring out the wrecking ball." This strategy resonated with my desire for a truly impactful reveal. The goal wasn't just to save myself money, it was to shatter her confidence and expose her brazen fraud in a way that left no room for doubt or denial. The tension mounted with each passing day. My normal routine felt like a distraction, my mind constantly replaying scenarios, anticipating Karen's reactions, perfecting my composure. The day of the mediation arrived, draped in a cold, drizzling rain that matched the anxious knot in my stomach. The meeting was held in a sterile, impersonal conference room at a legal office downtown. When Karen swept in, flanked by her smarmy lawyer, she exuded an almost theatrical air of self-importance and injured fragility. Her blonde bob was impeccably styled, her makeup flawless, her posture a picture of strained elegance, betraying not a single hint of the excruciating pain she claimed. She offered me a saccharine, pitying smile, as if I were a poor, misguided soul who had dared to cross her. Her lawyer, a man with eyes that seemed to constantly calculate numbers, shook my hand limply, his gaze dismissive. They took their seats, opposite me and Frank, the air thick with unspoken animosity and unspoken assumptions. The mediation began, and Karen's lawyer, with a practiced flourish, presented their case. He launched into a lengthy, dramatized account of the accident, painting me as a reckless, speeding driver who had violently rear-ended his innocent client, causing her catastrophic and life-altering injuries. Karen sat beside him, nodding gravely, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, though no tears were present. She chimed in with well-rehearsed lines about her debilitating pain, the constant throbbing in her neck, and how her life had been irreversibly altered. She even exaggerated the damage to her car, pointing to pictures that seemed to show dents and scrapes far worse than the minimal scuff I remembered. Her performance was Oscar-worthy in its conviction, her voice wavering with practiced emotion, describing nights sleepless from pain and days filled with agonizing physical therapy. The mediator, a quiet, observant woman, took diligent notes, her expression unreadable. My turn came, and I calmly presented my version of events, stating the facts simply, without embellishment. I acknowledged the minor impact, but stressed Karen's sudden, unprovoked stop at a green light. Frank then presented our preliminary findings, gently pushing back on the extent of her claimed injuries and the exorbitant repair estimates. Karen's lawyer scoffed, dismissing our account as desperate attempts to evade responsibility. Karen herself smirked, a look of triumph briefly crossing her face, confident that her carefully constructed narrative was impenetrable. The room felt charged with her smugness, her conviction that she had already won. She leaned back in her chair, a look of bored disdain on her face, as if my words were just background noise. With all due respect, I began, My voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. We have evidence that directly contradicts Ms. Peterson's claims, and the claims of her so-called witness. Karen's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then annoyance. Her lawyer shifted, a slight frown creasing his brow. "What evidence?" he asked, his tone laced with condescension. "Photographs of the bumper. Perhaps. We've already seen those. More than just photographs," I replied, my gaze fixed on Karen. "Evidence that captures the entire incident, from beginning to end." I reached into my bag, pulling out a small tablet. Karen's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a hint of something akin to fear replacing her arrogance. Her lawyer's eyes narrowed, a dawning suspicion in their depths. The mediator looked up, her pen poised. I pressed a button, and the screen flickered to life. "This," I said, my voice cutting through the suddenly silent room, "is what actually happened." The opening seconds of the dashcam footage, clear and irrefutable, began to play. The small tablet in my hand became the focal point of the entire room, its screen a silent, powerful judge. I had pressed play, and the opening seconds of the dashcam footage, clear and irrefutable, began to unfold. The video started with my uneventful drive, the green traffic light ahead, and the white luxury SUV cruising normally in front of me. Then, with stark clarity, it showed the SUV's brake lights flaring abruptly, an instant, full stop from cruising speed, without any obstacle or reason. My own car's gentle lurch forward as I braked hard, followed by the soft, almost negligible impact played out for all to see. The camera then captured Karen's car door flying open and her immediate, explosive emergence, her face already a mask of rage. Her shrill accusations, her theatrical gestures, her immediate claims of debilitating pain, her self-righteous pointing every carefully rehearsed nuance of her performance was laid bare by the unblinking eye of the dash cam. Karen, who had been leaning back with a smug expression just moments before, visibly stiffened. Her eyes, initially wide with disbelief, quickly narrowed to pinpricks as she watched her own premeditated fraud play out before her, as the video showed her animatedly screaming about whiplash while moving with perfect agility. A deep flush crept up her neck, staining her face a mortified crimson. Her jaw, which had been set in an arrogant sneer, now hung slightly agape, then snapped shut as if she were trying to physically contain the undeniable truth. She shifted uneasily in her seat, her gaze darting frantically between the tablet, her lawyer, and me, a desperate animal caught in a trap. Her lawyer, a man who had seemed so confident just moments ago, leaned forward, his face etched with a dawning horror. He looked from the screen to Karen, then back, his professional composure visibly cracking. He knew, he could see it, plain as day. The absolute, unassailable evidence of a staged accident, a performance meticulously planned and brazenly executed, was now undeniable. The mediator, who had maintained a calm, neutral demeanor throughout the session, let out a soft gasp. Her eyes, previously impassive, now held a mixture of shock and quiet indignation. She paused the video, just as Karen was making her most exaggerated, tearful claims on the phone. "Miss Peterson," the mediator's voice was low, but carried an undeniable weight of authority, "can you explain the discrepancy between your physical actions captured on this video and your claims of severe pain immediately following the incident?" Karen stammered, incoherent syllables escaping her lips, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. She tried to deny it, to dismiss the footage as edited or misleading, but the raw, unedited time-stamp in the corner of the screen silenced her. There was no escape. Her lawyer, realizing the futility of denial, held up a hand to silence her frantic whispers. His face was pale, his earlier arrogance replaced by a look of sheer defeat. He cleared his throat, his voice now a strained rasp. "Given this new evidence," he began, his eyes avoiding contact with anyone, "we may need to reconsider our position." It was the legal equivalent of waving a white flag, a tacit admission of guilt. The room became thick with the silent understanding of what had just transpired. Frank, my insurance adjuster, leaned back in his chair, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. He simply nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement of a battle won, not just by chance, but by truth. The rest of the mediation was swift and devastating for Karen. Her claims were immediately dismissed. Her lawyer, clearly embarrassed and now representing a client exposed as a fraudster, made a hasty retreat, advising her to withdraw all claims to avoid potential counter-litigation for insurance fraud. Karen, defeated and utterly humiliated, simply sat there, staring at the floor, her carefully styled hair now seeming to mock her disheveled composure. Her furious, entitled energy had completely drained away, leaving behind only the hollow shell of exposed schemer. The mediator closed the file, concluding that no settlement would be reached. As the evidence clearly showed no fault on my part, I was free. My claim was closed, my record clear, and the minuscule damage to my car would be repaired by my own insurance without a single increase in my premium. Walking out of that building, the drizzling rain no longer felt cold, but cleansing. The knot in my stomach had unraveled, replaced by a profound sense of relief and vindication. It wasn't just about avoiding a scam, it was about standing up to injustice and watching truth triumph over deceit. The experience had been frustrating, even infuriating, but it had also been a powerful reminder of the hidden dangers and hidden solutions in our everyday lives. The world is full of those who seek to exploit, to take advantage of others through manipulation and false narratives. But in an age where technology gives us constant eyes and ears, the truth often finds a way to reveal itself. My Dashcam, that unassuming little device, proved to be more than just a recording tool. It was a silent guardian, a witness that couldn't be intimidated, a beacon of truth in a sea of lies. Always remember, sometimes the smallest piece of evidence can be the most powerful weapon against the biggest lies. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the power of documentation.